So that's it from me. We're going to move over to a panel shortly. I'm going to invite the panelists, my fellow panelists, onto the stage. So we've got Will Addison. Hi there. We've got Ben Keith. We've got Annette, and we've got Hao Zhang. They're going to introduce themselves shortly. So if you'd like to take your seats, I will join you. The focus is very much going to be more on adoption. I think we talked quite a lot, well, actually, not we. The industry, I think, has talked a lot about big tech and how we develop some of this AI technology. But what we haven't, I don't think, talked so much about is adoption. What that means for the operator, what that means for the person at the other end who's adopting it. And so we're going to focus a bit on that in this panel. So welcome, everyone, joining me on the stage. I'm going to ask you each to introduce yourselves in 2 or 3 minutes, and then we've got some questions we'll dig into. So first of all, let's go first.
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much to BT for having me here. I'm Will Addison. I am the VP for Innovation at Gorilla Technology Group. Gorilla is, all about, Industry 4.0. It's about, helping industry verticals like Maritime, other industries to, harness, AI and really sort of specifically turn it into products and applications that, you guys can kind of engage with for a whole host of things that we will cover. I joined Gorilla in February when Gorilla acquired a company that I founded called Sequester Limited, which is a UK company. It was an AI company focused in very much video analytics. So our customers are security, national intelligence, law enforcement, people like that, trying to harness, this great asset, that we have in London and elsewhere of video to get insights from it. So background in that, and I'm also a founder and director of an organization called Scientific Venture Partners, which has a number of different AI technology assets and companies in its portfolio, so very familiar with the broader AI ecosystem outside of this video as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Hao.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Hao Zhang. I'm a co-founder and CEO of RoboK. We are a AI-based computer vision startup, originally as a spin-out from Cambridge University. We focus on building AI-powered monitoring solutions, improving safety and operational efficiency for industrial workplaces. We very focus on ports, other types of industrial workplaces like industrial warehouses, rail and roads, looking at how can we maximize the existing CCTV cameras that's already installed and turn them into insights, and most importantly, benefit people on the ground, and how do we build a software solution that can be used on a daily basis, not so kind of deviating from their main task, but helping them to be more efficient and be safer as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Hao. Annette.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me here. So my name's Annette. I am Deputy Chief Scientific Advisor at the Department for Transport. So I support the Department for Transport's independent Chief Scientific Advisor, as my job title suggests. But I also look after the kind of process and function for science, innovation and technology adoption within the Department for Transport. So that sort of gives me the kind of broader context on the kind of innovation landscape and actually how we sort of start landing and adopting some of these technologies within the wider transport sector. And specifically, we're working at the moment on a transport artificial intelligence strategy, which we're hoping to publish in the first couple of months of next year. And that is really sort of trying to look at right across all of the possible use cases across transport. So thinking about all of the different modes, but thinking about how people interact with AI, thinking as users, passengers, drivers, thinking about how the vehicles might adopt artificial intelligence, but also thinking about how transport operators and infrastructure owners and operators might use AI. So it's quite a broad remit. And so the strategy will probably be quite high level, but what we're really trying to tease out is some of the really big themes that show how we can really drive value through AI adoption in transport, how we can do so in a safe, responsible and ethical way, addressing some of the points you were making about potential bias and so forth. how we can use it to drive improved environmental outcomes, and really how we can sort of help stimulate the economy and make the UK a leader in this technology. I think we're already doing pretty well in the UK, but we really think that it's the job of government to help think, how can we enable and facilitate the UK to do even better?
Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you, Zoe, and thanks very much to Porter Tyne and to BT for hosting us. A great talk, Zoe. I'm Ben Keith. I'm from Frazer-Nash Consultancy. Frazer-Nash is a high-tech system engineering, system integration consultancy. We work in a variety of areas, from defence through to transport, nuclear, and central government. So we've got some incredibly clever engineers who are far brighter than me, but I'm not an engineer. I'm an operator through and through in the maritime domain. So I've had 23 years in the Navy, helicopter pilot, Type 45 captain. In fact, the Type 45 I captain, they've only ever had 5 former CEOs, and it just so happens that 2 of us are in the audience today. So that's a real honour, or sorry to inflict us on you, is the other way of looking at it. So my particular interest in AI is how to match the clever sort of engineering and the deep techie with the operator so what, the so what for us at the front line in defence terms, but in the maritime operational context in the wider maritime. What does it mean for the deck officer on the bridge of a ship? What does it mean in the ops room of a ship when you're trying to defend against air attack? And so I bring that, I match in Frazer-Nash, I match the demand signal from the Navy with the technical solution and the complex problem solving of Frazer-Nash Consultancy. So that's my interest today.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And, great set of panelists. And just to say, we will come to questions to the room and to those online as well. So please do get thinking. Do kind of challenge what we're saying. Do ask questions if there's something you don't think we've covered. So we'll come to those in a bit. So please do get thinking. So yes, we're kind of focusing a little bit more on the so what question. I think that you just said, but so what does this mean for those of us, or those of you in the maritime industry and more broadly? So I'm just going to ask you each in turn, perhaps starting here, actually with Ben, actually, given that your kind of experience on the front line is, given the whole range of applications of AI in its kind of more general developments recently, but the whole swathe of different techniques that we know about, what is the application that most excites you? And do you think it's getting the attention it needs?
Yeah, great question. I did try to write some notes, but I think the so what for me is we talk a lot, and I think, Matt, you referred to about AI in the business context. And I think whilst nothing's easy about AI, I think that's a bounded, known problem with known sort of incremental improvements, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But the AI in the operational space, I think, is all about the use case. What is the reason you want? Does it generally make operations safer, better, or quicker, or more efficient? If not, why are you trying to go after it? It's not the panacea. It's expensive. It's complicated. It's difficult. So what is the use case? And let's try and refine the use case to get the most impact. Now, in the military context, it's probably the best use case is probably mine hunting, because it's really dangerous. Your mine's in the water. Why would you put a diver down? So take the diver out of the water, use autonomous vehicles, and AI. Great. That's a reasonably simple use case. In the civilian context, it's probably something like oceanography, route survey. It's really dull. It's really boring. It's really important to get right and to be exactly on track. Actually, autonomous vehicles can do that and do that all day long, and much cheaper than putting humans in the loop. I think Fugro published some results that they got, and the cost differences between an autonomous vessel out compared with a manned crewed ship that takes loads of fuel and takes loads of days, and you have to go off task to go and replenish the food and all the things that make the humans tick. So what is the use case? And then let's refine that use case to get the most impact, because there's a real hype curve about autonomy and AI, and I think, Annette, you can talk about it much better than me. In the road, we've been talking about driverless cars for about 20 years, but actually the reality is it's really difficult to get there, really difficult frictions and certification and safety concerns. So let's refine the use case, make sure the use case is correct, and then go after it. And I think both in military and civilian maritime are struggling with some of those issues.
Music to my ears. I get a lot of people sitting here throwing AI at something, like, well, let's just hold on and think about what it is you need. And from the kind of the highways, kind of road transport area, what application most excites you?
Yeah, well, I think, first of all, it's really interesting when we talk about AI and everybody kind of lumps this actually really quite a huge spectrum of technology together and calls it AI. So it's everything from the large language models right through to, you know, arguably about semantics, but a sort of fairly simple automation, really. And so, and I think for me, it's about the fact that I think it's what Ben was saying, that this needs to be problem-led. There's a case for kind of pushing the technology to understand where it can go, to educate people into the terms of the possibilities. But you kind of really need to be able to connect that with a user case in order to really drive the value. So I think, for me, one of the most exciting kind of possibilities, I think, in probably in all modes of transport, but certainly what I've seen in roads, is using the data from CCTV analytics, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, to be able to actually be able to understand driver behaviour a lot better, to be able to understand where unsafe activities are happening before they happen. It's very difficult in a road transport system, and probably in Maritime as well, to actually have really good data on near misses. And so actually CCTV analytics or other means of kind of tracking location and driver behaviour should really drive you to be able to understand all those little nuances of behaviour that you might not be able to immediately see as a human, but a machine can detect, and then sort of correlate that to where near misses may happen. So that's just one aspect. But I mean, I've sat in a room where we've really connected data analytics with sort of people like traffic officers on the motorway network, and just seen the people's eyes lit up when you can show how data is interpreted in order to give them something that brings value. So I think it's huge scope there.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hal, what most excites you in the world of AI?
Yeah, for us as a solution developer, one thing we always ask our customers or users first is, how are you currently solving a problem? When we actually learn that, for example, what do you do after if there's an incident or an accident? People usually go check the CCTV footage, and sometimes they may have to go through, you know, days or weeks worth of CCTV footage, and found that actually there has been similar types, but not as a high level of severity, near misses that has happened in sort of the weeks leading up to that more severe and serious accident. So that was something that really validated our belief that there's a lot of maybe lower severity but high frequency and lower impact near misses that are happening, you know, not necessarily on a daily basis, but quite frequently in an industrial workplace. And these are near misses that may not always be reported because there's so much situational, you know, awareness about it that it may not be reported because of that was fine, the person was experienced, or that situation was different, it shouldn't happen again. But the fact that the solution that we're developing is that we're able to pick up these low impact issues on a daily basis and then present and visualize them for the users. And it was really, really powerful when we actually bring a lot of our engineers who probably never been to the warehouse or ports before starting at RoboK, that to actually see how people work. And I think there's a lot that AI developers and engineers need to learn about how people in these industries are working before actually designing a solution. And then you realize, you know, what sort of screen do they have in their offices? Like, is it going to be big enough to? Will they have access to devices that will send them an alert and alarm? So that really helps that kind of empathy and understanding to actually help to develop a solution that can be used on a daily basis. And to Ben's point also about kind of the so what bit. What we also found is when we actually are showing the sort of hazards being detected, it's also very important to also allow people to take actions on them and actually log each action, whether this has been resolved because the operative has been spoken to. This has been resolved because now this has been added to the health and safety training plan. This has been resolved because we've now had a new policy that these type of videos will be shown to lorry drivers every time when they come to the check-in office. And then start seeing the trends of these type of incidents recurring. And I think that graph is usually really powerful, that people on the shop floor can start looking at it and sharing with managers and start seeing the benefit of it, and then wanting to use that as learning materials and improve safety culture. So yeah, so I think what really excites me is the ability to actually see a product that's being built using AI, but actually being blended into the daily workflow of our users.
Thank you, Hal. Well, what most excites you? What application are you most excited about?
Yeah, no, well, so being a product person as well, I completely agree that kind of just the tangible nature of building an AI underpinned product, that actually is being used is where you have to start from. It's really what excites me fundamentally. But I think you can also start to sort of plan and put that in a bigger picture of kind of, what does my port, the maritime industry, look like, over the next, X number of years, 5 years, so 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, etc. And how can it harness, this capability set, to kind of build, as a bunch of tool sets, the port of the future. You can digital twins, etc. And you can have your vision, and it will require all sorts of different pieces of the jigsaw to come together. So, you obviously mentioned data. That's absolutely fundamental to a lot of this technology. Can we access, all the data that we need from, different ports? How can the industry work together, in order to build that kind of overarching data ecosystem that AI really needs to be able to drive the applications of today, and tomorrow, et cetera, to bring things through, and that's key. But of course, it's where do we start? To your point, we have to start somewhere. Let's build improve the value of the technology, to you in products, and then kind of build out the vision from there.
So that's really helpful. Probably we'll kind of start back with you and go the other ways, because I think it's the nature of the puzzle pieces, right? My next question is about the ecosystem, and given the importance, I think everyone said, is connecting the business need and the development with the so what, so there's that clear link. You mentioned the different pieces of the puzzle that are needed to make AI successful. Do you think the ecosystem, the maritime ecosystem, has all the puzzle pieces it needs to realise the vision for the future, or do you think that there's work to do, some pieces that need work?
Yeah. Well, I think sort of slightly to go back to my previous answer, I think to certainly the answer is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They are, we are ready today, to engage with this technology, and we've got applications. Hopefully you guys can come and see us outside. Some of the things we're doing using AI specifically, to kind of solve problems and that we can do now. But in terms of the capability set that we're building, absolutely we need to engage with the industry, with each other, to figure out okay, listen to the technologists, companies come and advise you, have your own people as well. What is the art of the possible, and what do we need to give technologists in order to bring those use cases and future products to fruition.
Brilliant. Hao, do you see any puzzle pieces missing, or is everything ready?
I think collaboration is definitely key for building a really useful product. So, for example, and I think there's a lot of actually avenues today that's available. So, for example, we're very fortunate to be able to work with Port of Tyne, through Connected Places Catapult, and the ability to start looking at the challenge that's actually funded by Department for Transport's Freight Innovation Fund. So you can actually start to see that a lot of these puzzle pieces getting together is that there's a technology developer who may have a piece of technology that's looking for use cases, but you need a subject matter expert from the industry, and then also from a funding perspective and from sort of the facilitation of a program as well. So I think that's really helpful. And then when these people are in the same room and start talking and start pulling the resources together, and that really empowers everybody within the partnership. And we definitely, as a small startup, we definitely benefited a lot from all of these programs together. That's encouraging technology to be applied to logistics, maritime.
Thank you. Annette, from a kind of government perspective, and the research perspective, given your background, what are you seeing? Are there missing puzzle pieces, or is everything in place?
Yeah, I don't think there's so much missing puzzle pieces as it's about connecting people together. So we're such a in fact, Hao and I were together at a round table earlier in the autumn with Baroness Veer, looking for future leaders in the maritime industry. And what was really apparent to me was that it wasn't so much a problem of technology, it was a problem of connecting the people who've got the technical capabilities and the technology with the people with the problems and with the people with the data. And those three people are not necessarily always the same. And I think most interestingly, when the people with the data are not necessarily the people with the problem. Yeah. And so I think for me, it's that probably all of the pieces of the puzzle are there, but it's about being able to connect them up and drive that right culture, but also think about how to stimulate an ecosystem in what's an age-old industry like many of our transport sectors are, and think about how do we actually drive and support and stimulate change. I don't think it's always the government's job government can kind of lubricate that with some funding. But actually, when you look at the scale of funding of change, it's probably what government puts in is actually quite small. But really, it's about, I hope, giving the good leadership, actually opening doors, setting expectations, and really sort of trying to make those connections happen.
Brilliant. Thank you. Ben?
Yeah, I agree with the principle. I think the ecosystem is in place. I think collaboration is there. We run, on behalf of Defence Science and Technology Laboratory, we run an AI research program with 120 people on it, and actually the majority of the work is delivered by SMEs and not the primes, and that's really important. The answer does not exist, or it does not only exist in the big companies, it exists in the SMEs that are represented here. I think in order to move faster and quicker and better on the world stage, we've got to dial up the equalizer around regulatory. We've got to get quicker and better at enabling through regulation, because that's the thing. And I know that might lead on to the next question.
That's a lovely segue.
Shall I carry on
that?
No. I have a particular hobby horse about rules of the road, the regulations, how we interact at sea. I don't know how many deck officers there are here. One I know. Anybody else? Okay, I won't go too deep into it, but it's similar like how you control rules around driving your car. There's some very complex rules at sea about how you interact that's been generated through hundreds of years of experience, but also international case law, and they're human-centric rules. So putting AI over the top of those is not a trivial ask. A lot of companies say, yeah, we're compliant with rules of the road, but you're not compliant until the regulator certifies you as compliant. And nobody's yet achieved that properly, as far as I'm aware, in the UK, both in the civilian or the military context, because it's a wickedly difficult problem. So we've got to get after how we regulate and certify and make sure that we're safe at sea. Because so 5 years ago, when I first entered the autonomy world, the future was everything was going to be autonomous. We're going to have autonomous vessels and ferries and routes from New York straight to London, and there'll be saving huge efficiencies in fuel. That's not going to exist. There are use cases that are really important. We've got to get the certification and regulation right. And rules of the road and how you interact at sea is a wickedly complex problem. And it's not a binary, two vessels, you turn right. That's easy. It's how you interpret the situation to get there. It's the difficult bit. And that's not an easy problem. So we're not there yet with regulation and certification.
That's really interesting. And my next question was going to be on regulation. So with the AI Safety Summit happening recently at Bletchley, lots of talk and expectation around AI regulation, different approaches around the globe. There's a really interesting space. We're already expecting more regulation. Be really interested to get a view. And we've had a couple of questions actually online or in this space as well, as to what you think we need in that space to be as effective as possible, particularly for AI maritime. So I don't know if you want to kind of build on that, Ben, in terms of anything else you want to say about standards, regulations, certification, to make the most of this opportunity.
I think it links really into your point, which is absolutely about people and AI, and it links into yesterday. Who has the skills to really lean in and drive this forward? And I don't think we've got MCA here, but they work with you. Actually, you need to upskill the MCA, and they're struggling for, like we all are, for skill sets and qualifications and experience in AI and certification. Yeah. If they're the certifying body, you've got to upskill them and to make them help them go faster. Yeah. And it's a real challenge, and the same challenges in the military. So it's about people, skills, experience in order to certify.
Brilliant, thank you. Annette, perhaps you're covering this in your strategy that's upcoming, but is there anything you wanted to add about regulation standards, for example?
Yeah, so I think there is a huge skills issue in this, and I think in terms of AI and maritime, probably one of the hardest nuts to crack is going to be about autonomy, just as it is in road transport. And in fact, just had the autonomous vehicles bill announced as part of the King's Speech. Yeah. But I think that so the approach to AI regulation that the UK is looking at is really how do we because like we said, AI is not one thing in itself, and actually it's weaved through everything we do. So actually the regulation needs to come through the regulatory system we already have, but those regulators need to be able to understand where AI is being deployed, where the risks and opportunities are. And to do that, they need to have the skills and understanding. I think it's probably the first step in the journey, really, is to sort of start understanding what the art of the possible is, and then, so basically what might go wrong, but also to be able to think about what's the route way through to having those regulations in the future. And and start working on that. I think, I can't remember who made the quote about Bill Gates saying that it's sort of you do a lot less in 2 years. So often we don't want to try to do these things because we think we can't do them in whatever funding cycle we've got, but that's not a reason not to do them.
Generally have time as it pans out. Thank you. Hao, any thoughts from you, from your perspective, in the other scale of things?
Yeah.
So what is it you want to see or don't want to see in regulation?
I think for us, I think the most important thing is what is the use of the AI? What is the purpose of the data being processed using AI? Is it for general good? Is it for the general public? Or what is sort of the purpose of it? What we found that usually to onboard sort of a new user, new customers, the types of rules that's currently in place today that mostly apply to us in processing CCTV cameras, there's GDPR, there's also cybersecurity, and I think it's very important for technology developers like us to know what is the expectation when you work with a larger organization. So, and then just make it easier for people who are adopting your technology as well, because the rules in place to protect the enterprises as well. And I think it's just quite useful. There's new government funding in the space of trustworthy AI, which is then how do you incorporate trustworthiness and responsible AI use, and they're pulling together academics, large end users, small end users, and smaller organizations as well who are technology developers. So I think it's that building the privacy by design or security by design at the get-go is very, very important as compared to an afterthought. So I think there's a lot of opportunity presented to kind of smaller companies or companies who are younger to be able to start incorporating them from the beginning. It's much harder to add things or change your infrastructure. So I think definitely on like being transparent for technology developers is like, what data are you pulling, and are you combining their data with somebody else's data, and how it's being done? And all of these would come at a lot of costs and resources and time for technology developers like us. But luckily that there's also a lot of tools, cloud services, a lot of that's already have that sort of being incorporated as well. But then there's definitely a balance of the speed of execution and deployment compared to the sort of the regulatory side of things, which can impact on the speed, but sort of if there are more tools and sort of more ways, how do you actually do it for smaller technology developers? That would be really helpful as well.
That's really helpful, thank you. Well, what's your perspective on this? Again, as from the development side, anything you would want to see and not want to see in regulation?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's very clear that the challenge in maritime, of course, and other industries is for the technologist is to build products, show us what you can do.
Yeah.
What I definitely do not want to see is lots of sort of slapped on regulation before we've even tried to sort of build solutions that are kind of useful. What's so great about Port of Tyne as a showcase port for innovation and all this stuff is you can actually engage with use cases. You do have the flexibility of bringing in the ecosystem partners, BT, Ericsson, whoever, to give you access to the data so that you can showcase the art of the possible. So I would say let the technologists work in those kind of safer, close-knit, small little showcase environments, show us what we can do, and then expand from there and regulate as appropriate as we go.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I'm sure we'll see this space evolve quite a lot in the next few months and years. What's come out of this is quite a lot on skills. Actually, we've had a question online around how you see AI working or helping in the kind of training, learning and development space. How you mentioned a bit of this earlier in terms of linking some of the work that you're doing and seeing that reflected in training. I just wonder if any of you got some perspectives on where you see AI helping with learning and development. Could it help with regulators and upskilling in certain areas? So, really keen to get your views. Will, do you want to start?
I mean, certainly it could. I mean, you need to have, it comes down to the sort of the engagement, doesn't it, between, the regulatory piece, and the technologists, and what are the sort of appropriate forums and mechanisms, for that to kind of happen.
Yeah. Would you use AI for learning and development in your own company?
In broader sense, in terms of, there are very interesting things that we're looking at in terms of automating the writing of code, for instance, which obviously, can make things much, much more efficient. So, just as a port would use it for port use cases as a technology company, I would engage with it in a very different way, for a technology business. So, yes, for automating code processes and things like that is probably the main area that I would look to use it on a day-to-day basis for my own organisation.
That's really helpful. Thank you. How? Anything else you want to say on learning development?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when bringing new tools to ports and basically providing, because for a tool like ours, it's only as good as if people are using them, are contributing, are adding their knowledge and adding how they're resolving things, like they request additional reviews on a particular hazard and how has it been done. So what we see is it also creates a good repository of knowledge that could be shared with new staff for onboarding. And what we actually observe is our users would also show, oh, this is what the system identified today, and this is what we did to another operation. So when it's in the warehouse, they might share it with dry bulk or other types of operations, which is quite useful because then they can see, it's not necessarily about training how AI works, but also training is that what are the possible ways of improving our current processes. But then again, it's the fact that this is doing AI. You can also find people who are quite interested, oh, how does this work? And when they also understand what they're doing on the platform could also help getting AI better. That's also very, 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 very interesting as well. It's also collaborative, and people see that the more feedback they give, the better the product becomes. I think that just becomes quite a positive cycle that you work closely with them. And sort of some other things we find quite useful is there was another user of ours that they have those daily safety reports, and people are looking at how do you summarize them, because then they can quickly become tens of pages long for every day observations. And people were trying chat GPTs and trying to, so you can actually see those things are actually quite useful for people who can start automating how they're processing documents and summarize. And I think those are really, really good tools when they're put into good use about saving people's time and focusing on the sort of the dull, dirty and dangerous tasks that it's great for AI to perform.
Brilliant. Thank you. Annette?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting one. I don't know if we've really thought about using AI in our training, but certainly, for sort of government workers, AI is just as important to help us do our jobs as it is for anybody else. And I think the important thing is that people become comfortable as users of AI, because we're all going to be that. It's not just a province of a few people in the corner who are the data scientists. We're all using it. At the moment, we've got, within DFT, we've got a trial of Microsoft Copilot, so that's a really interesting way of understanding what it can do to help us as kind of knowledge workers in our day-to-day job. And there's also a kind of government initiative called One Big Thing, which is actually about getting everybody in the civil service to do 7 hours of data training, 7 days of data training, I can't remember. But we're all, just trying to say that actually this is something, whether you see yourself as an analyst or a data, scientist, data is really important, and we all need to be literate at that. But yeah, so I think this will go on and on. And I have to say that I'm, I'd like to think I'm quite sort of reasonably savvy about seeing the AI that's on the market, but using Copilot to produce your first draft of meeting minutes, it's like magic. It's like, how did it do that? So I'm sure we're only at the start of that revolution.
I think we are. Thank you. Ben?
Can I give a politician's answer and actually change the question a little bit, if possible? I think so. If you're learning on the job and you come to talk about sort of AI augmentation, I think is really as a philosophical point, and hopefully stimulate some audience discussion. So there's two examples I've got. I drive a 7-year-old Volvo, and it thinks that it can brake in a situation where I'm not reacting well enough. The machine knows better, and it brakes for me in an accident situation. But in the maritime, it's reversed, because the only way we can certify at the moment, in the military context, in the MCA behind us, in that, is that we assess a machine to be safe enough if it's equivalent to what a human would do. So the benchmark is human, and if there's something going on in the autonomy space, the default action is for the human to take control off the machine, rather than in the transport case where the Volvo knows best, it brakes for me. So I think there's a philosophical question about at what point is there a tipping point that AI is better than the machine. So if you look at any accident investigation stats for the last 100 years in maritime or air, the technological failures is reduced dramatically, but the human failure stays static, almost static over 100 years of aviation and longer for maritime. So there becomes a tipping point that the AI or the autonomous vessel is safer than the human. And what point is that? And do we incrementally get there and try and mess around with the rules of the road to get there? Or do we at some point say, let's turn it on its head, let's switch to 100% AI, by exception the human? And I know if I'm driving a ship through the English Channel traffic separation schemes, the busiest stretch of water in the world, the accidents happen because of human making a mistake, not because of something going wrong. So how do you flip the paradigm?
Gosh. And together with that, I mean, that's a really interesting point, that going back to training and development as well, if we're using AI more and more to take off some of the tasks that we typically use for training people, so, in the legal setting, you get, people training to do information retrieval, and we're getting machines to do that. And I guess in the technology development world, again, code development, if you're getting more code development done automatically, how do you then train your coders? So I think and so at that point, I think it connects with your point around, at what point do you switch, who has primacy, the machine or the person? Well, I mean, what journey has that person had to get to where they are? What do they know? What's their situational awareness?
And where's the boundaries of the ethical sort of acceptability? Because if you I think there's some stats of something like 98% of AI-enabled doctors' assessment of a condition is right, but everybody talks about the 1% that's wrong. The human doctors have something like 80-85% strike rate, but we don't talk about that. So where does the ethical acceptance switch over?
Well, that links on to another question that's come in from the audience, so thank you for that, which is around how can we reassure customers and colleagues who have a much more negative perception of this kind of technology? And I think, perhaps every one of us has a little bit of maybe I'm speaking for myself, has a little bit of a concern in some areas, given the lack of diversity potentially in people developing this, but also, there are stories out there, it can go wrong. I think even, Annette, you were talking about summarising meeting notes and stuff, who's to know if that's right or wrong? Who's to know if a summary is accurate or not, unless we check it? But there are many people out there who are fearful of this, and I think that's understandable. Do you have anything you'd want to say around how we can make things easier or give them some more reassurance? How can we bring everyone on the journey with us? Annette, do you want to?
Yeah, there's some work that actually in my previous organisation, National Highways, did, and actually also within the Department for Transport, about looking at public attitudes to technology. And actually one of the things when we engage with our ministers over the draft sort of transport AI strategy, their first questions is, how do you take the public with you? And surprisingly, often you do find that the public is more receptive to technology than you think they might be, certainly in certain contexts. But I think a lot of the theme that was coming through was that desire for transparency, to understand where it's being used, how it's being used, what are the guardrails in place. And I think once that's understood, if we're talking about sort of public-facing technology, they're generally reasonably accepting of that. So I think that there are sort of surprising things that are more positive than you think, but I do think that there's big challenges where you've got to do that big flip. We've certainly seen in the safety space where there is a real issue around perception actually not matching the data.
Thank you. Ben, anything from the operator's perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a bit controversial to say it's not new, is it? How do you assess any new technology as safe, whether it's automation or AI? Well, in our world, it would be a system engineering sort of failure mode analysis, and the work's ongoing to set a set of AI standards through European Union, AI standards up in the UK, NASA, America, they're all setting up standards. You set the standards, you assess against those standards, and then you have a trustworthiness report or indicating modes of failure, and you react accordingly. And that's how you assess any automated system or machine system. The important bit is to make sure the AI in the machine learning does some self-reflection and says, actually, I've analysed this myself and I know I'm weak in that area because I don't like that data. Let's discount that and flag it up to the human and say, I cannot give you the answer you want, over to you.
I mean, there's an interesting, quite specific question here that follows on from what you said. Do we need a traffic light type warning system for how far along AI is coming or how quickly AI is coming, like having danger alerts for various other threats to the UK? Do you think we need some form of traffic light system for AI? I don't know.
No, I mean, I think
Interesting question.
it is an interesting question, and I thought you did a fantastic job in terms of summarising where the AI industry really is. Because what sort of frustrates me slightly, and you saw it in AI Week, even last week, there's a lot of sensationalism around the technology, and it really isn't helped by people like Elon Musk, et cetera, who just sort of become, these sort of bastions, if you like, for the sort of the downside, sort of scary case.
Yeah.
Whereas the reality of where, at least I see AI, it very much echoes your own view, that we have got a long way to go before we are in that kind of realm. So a traffic light system, effectively, just to sort of say, well, listen, guys, don't worry too much about this stuff yet. We are learning an awful lot about the technology, its application. Might well be, a sort of sensible way to go. Who does that, and who has legitimacy and whatever to stand up and say that? I don't know, but it's an interesting idea.
Brilliant. Okay. Any other comments on that kind of question?
I mean, my head always goes to thinking about whenever you've got any system like that, is, what's it applying to? How's it applying? How do you define green? How do you define red? But I do think I guess the point behind it is, we need to be really transparent about where we're using AI, where we're using people's data, actually, because there's a huge amount of data that gets collected that people don't even realise is collected about them. So I think there's a huge thing about transparency there, and being able to understand what's the role that AI and machine learning is playing, and how are we going to monitor that and understand how it performs, and have we got the right regulatory approach in place. So a traffic light system, maybe not, but I think the philosophy behind it about sort of always, checking on ourselves and making sure that we are actually doing what's intended is really, really important.
That's really helpful. Sorry, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the metaphor Rishi Sunak uses of guardrails is probably appropriate. I think because over-regulation will stifle innovation everywhere, won't it? It will just slow us down. But we have to put the parameters in place. And I'm not a software engineer, but I think there are principles, aren't there, where you code in, you don't, if you accept these principles, you code in the fact that humans has a right of veto, or ethical coding is really important. I think that's the bit we've got to emphasise, the principles and the ethics, not the over-regulation, because that is dangerous.
We've got a principles-based approach in the UK. It was almost like Asimov's laws again, isn't it? We've got 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to open it up to the audience here as well, in case anyone has any questions. Well, I've got a couple more for the panel. Thank you. We've got one here.
Hi, Keir Gravel from Frazer-Nash. On day one of the conference, we obviously spoke about a lot of the environmental issues and the drive towards decarbonisation on one hand, and how we've got to do that. And obviously today we're talking about AI, which has a lot of opportunities, but also is very energy intensive.
Yes.
And it would appear that these two, on the surface, are almost in conflict with each other. Is that the truth? Are they in conflict with each other, or can we have our cake and eat it and do both well and make them work together?
I think that's a great question.
Great question.
Yeah, Will, did you want to comment?
No, I mean, it is a great question. I mean, if you just, and you alluded to when you're talking, I mean, just the amount of energy, that these large language models, consume and automate is unbelievable. I mean, the scale of the processing and the power that you need to produce that is a lot. And how you effectively monetize it is a massive, we don't know yet, quite honestly. And so, the question is absolutely right. What I would say is, with the sort of bite-sized stuff, kind of like little applications, so CCTV camera processing, et cetera, sort of the edge processing is a lot lighter. The models that you can run now that actually deliver you your use case can be tiny, so really, really small. And so the energy usage to do that is not a lot, really at all. So your value is kind of in that. So I think we just sort of build out from there, really.
I think as developers as well, I think, maybe I'm speaking on behalf of us, but we're not quite at the point, but I think we need to get to the point where we're taking into account environmental cost when we're deciding which technique to use. I mean, quite often, me and my team are saying, no, we don't need an LLM for this. We can do it with, plain old natural language processing techniques, and that's much cheaper and easier. So I think we probably need to go back to your standards, as part of that decision making, should take that into account right from the very start. Anyone else have any comments on that question?
But interesting, I'll pick up on a great question, Keir. I'll pick up on that last point. It might be less energy intensive, but it's probably 5 hours or 4 hours of a human's time, which you have to pay for and feed, and they're going to work in the car. So it's not as binary, is it?
It's a whole life thing.
And in fact, where AI can really help are those incremental gains that in the maritime industry that we probably never, it happens. I remember it driving my ship where you get somewhere the night before, just in case the weather's bad, and you use loads of fuel to get there quickly. Then you loiter off the port for 6 hours waiting to go in, and merchant ships do that as well. So let's use AI to make routes better. Let's do big data analysis on the weather. Let's go there at exactly the efficient speed that we want to get there on time, that the cranes and the offloading capability is ready to go, and that's a huge. Those incremental gains will add up to be a massive environmental saving, and that's enabled by big data analysis and AI.
Thanks very much for your question. We've got one at the front and one at the back. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark Ray from the Connected Places Catapult, and I want to countenance what I'm going to say next by saying I'm not a Luddite. I've spent the last 20 years promoting technology, but I do have one area of concern, and I'd like to test with the panel. And as I say, I've been working for 20 years in technology development, so I'm old enough to have gone through all the era of when we started to introduce new communications technologies, so things like LinkedIn, and particularly when Twitter, of course now known as X, came in. And that had a big impact in the way that we then started to communicate with each other and our approach to communications. It started to drive down our ability to process wordage. So they noticed a marked deterioration in the number of words any one person could process in a single sentence, and the amount of time you could spend paying attention to anything. And one aspect that I've not heard anybody talk about, and is it an issue, do we need to countenance that, is will AI and the use of things like Copilot, that sort of generative stuff, will that start to lead to a further drop back in our cognitive ability as human beings? And is that a realistic risk that we need to perhaps contact? So I never hear anybody talking about that.
Thank you, Mark. So quickly then, are we offloading so much to the machine that we're in danger of not being able to do anything ourselves? What do you think, Will?
Well, I think this is an excellent and exciting philosophical point about the purpose of humanity, potentially. Where we sort of seed quietly into the distance as this fantastic machine that we've created, and this is the sort of the end of it all, as we sort of pass the baton on to. I think, I would argue that, it's sort of a classic point where, you're sort of fact-checking and sort of that sort of stuff. And to the extent you're sort of relying on technology, you're sort of lazy in your debate. It's true. I would say that, the use of technology means to you, you're sort of freeing up time to engage with, other forms of medium. I mean, it's a sort of scientific question about the sort of human mind, in my opinion. It's sort of, what are we doing to sort of fulfill ourselves?
That's something to over-drink, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, on that, I'll shut up.
No.
We still need people to debug the code that
Yes,
AI
exactly.
wrote.
Yeah. Exactly. I think human in the loop is absolutely vital. Any final comments from?
I think it frees up the human to do the things that humans are best at, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I know the point about attention span. I mean, my kids would prefer to watch YouTube shorts, and that's it. They can't watch a film anything more than 10 minutes. But it frees us up to make the right decisions. It's just like in a air defense scenario, you talk about AI to help make the right decisions. So then the human, can free up the capacity and think, actually, let's look at the bigger picture, or be artists, or look at the code from a higher view rather than the intricate view.
Absolutely. Thank you. I've got one more question so we can finish on time.
Hi, Nick Tudor. I'm founder and CEO of D-Risk, and also the Design Authority Chair for the Alta project, which is looking at autonomy in the offshore sector. I was at the Defence AI Centre's conference earlier this year, and the outcome of that, after 5 of these conferences over the last 7 or 8 years or so, was that we don't know how to use AI in defence, in the UK MOD, obviously. So that's quite interesting. And one of the reasons for that is that AI is unverifiable, and hence tilts towards the point about how do I trust this. In particular, it comes up with plausible but wrong answers, otherwise known as false negatives. So it's easy to watch the false positives because that's an annoyance. And Amazon Web Services, I visited their headquarters in Washington a few years ago, and they were all about all false positives. They're very annoying. Yeah. Question to ask, though, and question for the panel is, how do you know you haven't got any false negatives?
Yes, I think
that's the dangerous one.
I think that's a great question. I think it touches on my point about who's to know. Quite innocuous having it summarise a meeting, but who's to know if it's not missing any voices or missing something out. Is that something of concern? These false negative, it's not a new issue necessarily, but is that something you're concerned about?
I honestly think that it comes back to 2 things. One is around the process by which we adopt these technologies. So Just like anything in the engineering space where we need to know it's physically safe, it's well built, etc., and that needs to go through a rigorous period of testing before, you know, standards and so forth are updated. Exactly the same case with using AI. You can't just assume that because you're using an AI tool, it's not actually intelligent a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Like you say, it's quite just an automated set of processes. You need to be able to have those sort of testing regimes to be able to understand how it actually behaves in the field. So I think there's something around like that. It's any tool that's got its own limitations, and it's down to us as humans to be able to understand and delineate what those limitations are.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and that's a great hobby horse, particularly about that on a bridge scenario where you spent years training a deck officer, an officer watch, to try and interact correctly with the shipping around it, and you can assure every part of that process. You can test and probe and ask questions, and even the softer skills about your hair on the back and neck, that something doesn't sound right, doesn't feel right, I've just been asleep, now I'm instantly awake. Where you can't assure that in an AI machine learning context, you can only see the outcome. You can't assure what goes on in the black box scenario. So that's when you need to set the trustworthiness standards appropriately so you can measure and build the trust that the humans have in it and the objective level of how much trust you've got in it. When those two things are balanced, you achieve trustworthiness standards. So there is work going on that we're doing with DSGL and NASA about trust in flying control systems, weapon assurance, all that stuff. That is going on. They haven't got to the final answer yet, but we are making a progression to get there.
Okay, thank you so much for your questions. We've got about 5 seconds left. If you can just say one word, I think that there's going to be a lot of talk around the excitement around new technologies later. So I think we're being balanced. I don't want to end up on a low, but if there's one word of just a note of caution you'd want to kind of people to think about when we're looking at this technology, what would that be? Mine would be fairness or unfairness.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Balance, fairness.
Yes, balance,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
From my perspective, collaboration, I think,
Yeah.
from all the parties who are using AI and developing it.
Thank you. Annette.
Equity and cheating, because I think that AI looks back at data, it doesn't look forward.
Yeah.
So how do we make sure equity is coming out of this?
Really,
And explainability to build trust, I think.
really good one. Thank you so much to the panel. Really great points you've made. So thank you very much. It's a fantastic